crime and cosmetics video on my Psycho Sunday. Now, if you're new here and you don't know what you're letting yourself in for, then let me fill you in and tell you what you're going to be watching. Every Sunday I upload a video about true crime stories and I use cosmetics to make myself look pretty. I'm obsessed with true crime and I'm obsessed with makeup and all things beauty. So why not combine the two and share them with you? I will put a disclaimer up before I start to say that the following video will contain graphic discussions and maybe crime photos and different stuff that won't be suitable for younger viewers. And with that said, let's get into the story. So this story is about a Japanese serial killer named, now let me try and get this right now because it is a very complicated name. It is Satomo Miyake. So I'm just going to call him Miyake because I'm not very good at pronouncing the name. So he was also known as the Rat Man, which he called himself, weirdo, and he was also known as Dracula because he drank the blood of his victims. His victims were 4 little girls, which makes me hate him even more. He's a cannibal, a rapist, child rapist, and a necrophile or necrophile. And for those who don't know what a necrophile is, it is someone or some sicko who does sexual acts with dead bodies, corpses. Yeah. So this is what this type of sicko that we're talking about this week. He killed 4 young girls between 1988 and 1999 in Tokyo and Saitama. Miyake was born in August 1962. He was born premature, which they say, because he was premature, caused he had a disability, disfigurement. And I'll show you what I mean now in a picture. This is freaky on its own. I gotta be honest, all my nails, I quite match him a bit. I didn't think of that. His hands were deformed. So they say this is because he was premature. But I think, which I will tell you now, there is another reason why. Because when he was born, his father, he had a weird upbringing. And his father had an incestuous relationship. This was going on before Miyake was born, with his own sister, so Miyake's auntie. But then when Miyake was born, later on in life, he found out that his mother, who he thought was his mother, was actually his auntie. So it was actually his father's sister. So it was incest, I think, because of the incestuous relationship. Because they do say if you've got the same genes as someone else, you know, basically have a sexual relationship with a member of your family, especially like a sibling, but you are like, your genes exactly match, then it causes something which makes the child, then if they end up having a child together, it makes them deformed. And where I used to live years ago, there used to be a family that lived down the hill. They were all cousins. No, the mother and the father, sorry, were cousins, and they had about 6 or 7 children. They were first cousins, not second cousins. And every one of their children had a disability or a special need because the mix of the same genes. So I think, this is my opinion, but I think this is why Ayako had deformed hands. He went to school and his so-called mother and father were really hard on him and tried forcing him to succeed in everything. So he was quite pressured through his school life to succeed. He was quite brainy and tried his hardest. But later on in life, school life, his grades started dropping dramatically because he was getting really bullied in school, really bad. This affected his education. So when he started school, he was working to become a teacher. Because his grades started dropping, he changed his mind and he wanted to become a photographer or a photography teacher. Through quite a lot, considering he was being bullied in school, so this is affecting his education, blah blah blah. And his father continued to get his sister pregnant on numerous occasions, so this ended up with Ayako having a few siblings who were also his cousins. So that's quite, well, not quite, this is very mixed up, innit? So he kept to himself in school and he didn't have no friends. He was always on his own. Even out of school, he was still on his own, just a loner. He would read books and watch movies, and I think that's all he ever did. He had an awful relationship with his parents. Gotta do that because it's like parents. And an awful relationship with his siblings. The only support he ever had was off his grandfather. His grandfather passed away in 1988. So when this happened, he fell into deep depression. A few days after the death of his grandfather, his sister, Ayako's sister, caught him watching her while she was having a shower. Stepped out to the bathroom and confronted him, and he proceeded to attack her. When his mother learnt about what had happened, what he'd done to his sister, she confronted him, so he later on then attacked her as well. So you can imagine now the picture I'm painting, because this is what it usually is, isn't it? You know, if you watch crime, you know that usually 9 times out of 10, you know, you're not born a serial killer, I don't think. It's what your surroundings make you into, like the way you was brought up, things going on at home. Obviously being bullied is like a major one, I think, for all serial killers I watch. 9 times out of 10 they've been bullied. 9 times out of 10 they'd abused at home. You know, they're not just born into this weird way of thinking. It's a learnt process. Not that it excuses, you know, anybody, excuses any serial killer, any psycho, but it makes them into something that's not how we would class as normal. What we think is normal, well, what I think is normal, and many other people, is not what they think is normal, because they've learnt a different way of life. So their outlook on life is just careless. His first victim was Ayako Nomoto. I hope I'm saying this right now. And she was abducted. He took her off the streets on the outskirts of Tokyo. He took her into his car. He strangled her. Then he took photos of her body. He sexually molested her corpse. And then he buried her then in the hills of Tokyo, on the outskirts of Tokyo. He then returned to the body after a few days, and he cut off her arms and her legs. He burnt the arms and the legs after he'd cut them off. He ground the bones up, and he sent them in a letter and said what he'd done to the poor child, and there was photos in there as well of her dead body, and he sent them to the parents. Second victim was Erika Namba, and he kidnapped her off the streets as well when she was walking home from her friend's house. He forced her into the car, then he made her take off her clothes so that he could take photos of her and do all dirty sexual stuff to her. And then he strangled her to death, and he also hid her body up in the hills. He got rid of the clothes, disposed of the clothes in a nearby wooded area. His next victim was Masami, another little 7-year-old girl who he also abducted from the side of the road when she was walking. He took her to the same place where he'd killed Mari, the first victim. He strangled her to death like the other victims. After performing sexual acts on her, then he left her body in the same place as he'd left the previous victim. His fourth and final victim was Ayako Nomoto, a 5-year-old little girl. So he convinced Ayako to take photos of her, which then he sexually assaulted her and strangled her, the same as the other victims. He then took the corpse of the poor little girl to his apartment. where he tied her up and took more photos of her and sexually assaulted a little corpse. He continued to do these sexual acts for the next 2 days, whilst he took loads of photos as well. He dismembered her body and cut off her torso and hid it in a nearby cemetery, and the head in nearby hills, which, like, where he was living, it was like steep hills, like going either side of like houses and stuff and buildings. He kept the hands of the little girl for himself, and he dismembered them. Well, he dismembered them, obviously. He kept them, and he later ate them. Ate parts of them anyway. Also was known for drinking the blood of his victims. This was why what gave him the name, the other name, apart from Ratman and Little Girl Murderer, and he was given Tokyo Vampire because of drinking the blood of his victims. Sick. He wrote numerous letters and put them together with the photographs of his victims. And in these letters, he explained what he'd done to them, and he sent them to the parents of all his victims. What he got out of that, I don't know.
Not content on just killing the children, Miyazaki enjoyed taunting the victims' families. After killing Erika, he sent the parents a postcard that read, "Erika, cold, cough, throat, rest, death." Regularly phoning the families, sometimes leaving the phone ringing for 20 minutes until they answered, then greeting them with silence or laughing and just plain gibberish. He wrote the Kono family a letter telling them that the daughter's body smelled so badly it was the worst smell in the world, but it gave him so much sexual pleasure he could not bring himself to throw it away.
Then on the 23rd of July 1989, he tried to take photos of another little girl. But to his shock, and what I am glad of, the father caught him and contacted the police, told them exactly what he'd done. As he was getting into his car then, the police came and arrested him. They took his car, searched his car, and found photos and stuff. They went to his house, his apartment, and they found numerous footage, pictures, you name it, every bit of evidence that he could have captured of these sick things he'd done. You name it, it was in that apartment. So when he went to court, he was arrested and he went to court. He didn't show absolutely any remorse for his victims. He basically said that he thought he was doing a good thing by drinking this blood and eating parts of his victims, that he was doing a good thing, and that the rat man in his head had told him to do it. So, yeah, he said this rat man was his alter ego. So he would slip in and out of this rat man when he needed to. And he thought he was doing good. He talked a load of nonsense during the trials. He also tried to say to the court that he was insane, you know, because he was using his alter ego, and he thought that it was the right thing to do and everything, that he was insane. But the court just outruled it. They knew that he wasn't insane. He just wanted to do these sick things, and he was getting something out of it. He was getting sexual gratification, or whatever they say, out of it. He was sentenced to death on April 14th, 1997. Why they had to wait so long was because Tokyo courts and Saitama, if I'm saying that right, another place, the courts there as well, they had adjourned it and put it more forward for whatever reasons, I don't know. And then he was later then, in 1997, he was put to death by hanging. I didn't even know that was a thing. That was still a thing in 1997, but obviously it was. It must have been in Tokyo, in Japan. Give you something to think about. Very strange. And that concludes today's Psycho Sunday. Let me know what you think of my makeup look. If there's anything that you want to know, such as what cosmetics I've used, where I've got my nails from, or anything that you see in the video, just don't hesitate to ask and I will answer you. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.